Welcome, governors. Hey, this is Adashi here, and I just want to do a quick video and talk about Harold. So anyone who's seen any of my Facebook posts the last week or two will notice that I've really been railing and beating the drum on this change that Lilith did to the text on Stamford Bridge. Now, I don't know if the functionality was actually changed or not. I only have anecdotal evidence to suggest it was. But without hard evidence, we just have to take Lilith's word for him that they didn't change anything. So let's talk about why this is such a big difference and why it changes fundamentally how Harold works and how kind of I expected him to work along with many others. So the fourth skill triggers a 20% chance of doing a normal attack. Well, this used to be whenever he did damage. So if you were to kind of play out how a cycle would work, basically from the time he does his active skill to the time he does his active skill again, if you have a Alex Harold setup, which was what most people were running prior to this change, you're going to have a cycle of roughly 10 seconds because there's no rage regen there. Well, if we look at his third skill of Varangian Guard, this is his stacking attack and defense debuff, and it lasts for 8 seconds, which means you need to use this skill again within that 8 seconds window or it won't stack. Well, without any rage gen, you're not going to stack this. But here comes in Stamford Bridge. Well, Stamford Bridge has a 5-second cooldown, and under the text of the old wording, it would trigger effectively every 1 to 2 seconds, give or take. And that was because you attack them, they attack you, you counterattack them, they counterattack you. That's one round of combat. So effectively you do damage twice every round. And let's take out everything else. There's no swarms, no skill damage, none of that. Let's just take into account attack and counterattack. Well, you need 5 chances to get to 100%, so basically you're going to trigger this once every 5 times you do damage. So that means every 1 to 2 seconds, maybe 3, but probably 1 to 2. So if you have a 5-second cooldown and you trigger it every 1 to 2 seconds, you're going to expect to do this ability every 6 to 7 seconds. So let's go back to Varangian Guard for a second. You need to trigger this every 8 seconds. Well, if you're triggering Stamford Bridge every 6 to 7 seconds, it doesn't matter. You will always have this buff up. The chances of not triggering it within that 8-second window is actually really low. And keep in mind that you're also going to have your active skill going off every 10 seconds. So you'd have to line up, and that chance of not stacking Varangian Guard becomes very, very low. Not zero, but very, very low. Well, let's now look at the change. So now it's not triggering, effectively having 2 chances to trigger every round, but 1. So you need 5 rounds to guarantee that it's going to trigger. So most likely you're going to trigger it on the 3rd round on average, but now 5-second cooldown plus potentially 3 to 4 seconds that this might trigger. Now it's pushing you out to that 8 to 9 second window. So this could effectively drop. If you get unlucky, this might not trigger until 9 or 10 seconds. Now you still do have your active ability going off every 10 seconds, but the chances now of those windows aligning, so you use your active ability and you use Stamford Bridge in the same window or close to it, you get a little unlucky and this buff falls off. And when I did testing in my last arc after this wording is changed, that is exactly what happened. Now the anecdotal evidence to say that this was mechanically changed, that never happened before. After the wording that happened, it could just be I got really unlucky and I was getting quite lucky before, maybe, but when I talked to other people, they experienced the same thing after this change has happened. So what does all this mean? And I think at the end of the day, it's really frustrating because Lilith didn't communicate these changes to us, and you invest in these characters, or these commanders, I'd rather say, And then it turns out that what you thought they were going to do won't work, or they won't work the way you thought they were, and there's no getting that investment back. So what am I going to do personally on my account? Well, I'm still going to run Alex and Harold, but rather I'm going to run Harold and Alex. So I do have an expertise Alex, and I've come up with a talent build, and this is what I think people are probably going to do. And it is going to be running primarily skill for Rejuvenate. Rejuvenate will give you from a 10-second window down to an 8-second window, which will guarantee the stacking, attack, and defense debuff even after these changes were put into a place. And I think this will work. I think Harold is still going to be relatively effective at rallying. I don't think he's going to be a top end, but then again, I didn't think he was going to be a top end rallier to start with. But anyways, that's kind of why I was pretty frustrated and why mechanically this is such a huge change to him. Not necessarily that he's now nerfed into oblivion and useless, but because the setup that I thought I was going to use, that I thought was going to be very effective, now won't work. And I guess just to talk about why I was really excited about that Alex Harold build and why I really went into Harold so early is if you look at how this would play out, Alex uses his active skill, it debuffs the enemy for 4 seconds. 2 seconds later, Harold uses his active skill, benefits from the increased damage the enemy is taking, then he also gives a 20% damage boost, which means now you have a 2-second window in which the enemy is taking extra damage, 30% extra damage, and you are doing 20% extra damage with a chance to proc Stanford Bridge and lead the charge. So in that window, you're going to have these tremendous burst opportunities. And it theoretically could still play out that way with Harold Alex, but it's just not going to be that consistent. So I think he's still going to be good. That's kind of why I was talking about and why mechanically Harold is really, that's a huge difference. But anyways, once again, thank you for watching these videos. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe to see future videos coming out. Thank you guys and have a good night.